Thank you. That was quite the intro. Let me give a shout out to my grand mentee, Ellen. Isn't she fabulous? Isn't she doing an amazing job today? I think she is. And since I have the mic, proverbially, we are going to agree with me. Now, what we want to do today with this session, two things. The first is, those of you who know me, I do not like to talk to myself. And so this is going to be a fairly interactive session. The second thing is, I have helpers today. So my mentees, they're going about their business this morning when they got text messages from me that I'm going to put them to work. So here we go. Christina and Natalie will be facilitating the breakout session. Debbie and Lauren, you'll be helping me keep an eye on the chat for Q&A. Okay? Sound good? You are not disturbing me if you throw in questions in the middle of the presentation. I'm not one of those people who will freak out and say, what are you doing? Wait till the end. Questions throughout is perfectly fine. Nobody ran you out of your PJs, Natalie. Questions are perfectly fine. Today, we're going to be talking about teams. And this is a topic, honestly, that I'm very, very passionate about, because when I came into district leadership, just to contextualize, I came into district leadership in the middle of my residency. Anybody who knows anything about medical school and the whole process, you know, residency is a trip. You are working sometimes 80-hour weeks, hot mess galore. And you are trying to figure out some kind of a way. Somebody convinced me to do Toastmasters leadership in the middle of this. Crazy thought. And I realized very quickly that the only way I was going to have not even success, but just survive the first year of leadership, I needed a team. And so my goal was, how do I find the best people who can support me to make sure that we're successful together? And that's the beginning of my team building journey, if you want to call it that. So it was out of necessity. It was because I realized that I only have 24 hours in the day. I only have one head, one heart, and there's only but so many things I can do at each time. Now we're going to get started by me sharing my screen. Ellen, just do a pause check for me to let me know if you can see it. You see it all right? Okay, so thumbs up. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So we're going to get started. So the question for you and for me, to team or not to team? And I say that because I'm using team as a verb today, where it's an intentional decision. So a team is not just a group of people, a noun, a collection of individuals. It's an actual verb. So the question is, to team or not to team? We are going to do a little bit of a slido activity today. So everybody pick up your phone or whatever device you're on, computer, etc. You're going to go to slido.com. Whenever you get to Slido, you will put in those numbers, and the numbers are 4578820. Again, 4578820. A poll should come up for you. Everybody see that? Is that coming up for anybody? Okay, I see a couple of people on there, so I know it's live. I see 4 of you. I'm going to need more people to get there. Let's get there quickly, everybody. Okay, we have more people. I see 5. Okay, come on, people. We have about 40 of us here. So I want to give us a little bit of time for a few more of us to get onto Slido before we get started. All right, so the question is, what comes to your mind when you think about the word leadership? Okay, somebody says collaboration. I'm going to need more answers from us. Teamwork, slacker, unity, diverse skills, mutual respect. I see group, I see fun, I see chair, I see unity, not alone, success, synergy, meetings, responsibility, multi-skill. Somebody says dysfunction, building up, sharing responsibilities, not being alone, family, people working together, building up, partners, reward, success comes up again. So I see quite a few, we have some answers. I see trust, creativity, a common goal, extroverts. I'm going to throw in the introverts. We also make our little cameo into teams as well. completing tasks, opportunities. All right, so I have a sense of what we think about when we hear the word team, storming, humbleness, etc., communication. All right, I'm gonna move on to the next question. And if you're still on it, don't feel any kind of way, keep answering. The next question is, which of the following is more true about you? I perform better when I lead a team. I perform better when I'm a member of a team. I don't even like teams altogether. And we can be honest, I'm none the wiser who said what, who answered what, so you can be as transparent and as truthful as you need to be. Okay, so we're still kind of, I'm gonna leave this one for just a little bit, just so I can get as many of us as I can. Okay, so now I am going to stop my share just for a quick second, and we are going to do a quick breakout room activity. And what this activity is going to do for us very quickly. And Natalie and Christina, ready yourselves. This is where I need your help. We are going to break out into 2 rooms, the same measure, so you don't matter what you answered. And the question that I want Natalie and Christina to ask you when you go into the breakout rooms, we're going to have 10 minutes, is why do you perform better when you're the team leader, if that's what you selected? Or why do you perform better if you're the team member, if that's what you selected? Or for those of you who are like, I don't even like teams, whether I lead it, whether I'm a part of it, I want none of that. I want none of that teamwork. Why did you select that answer? So we're going to go into the breakout room at this point. And Ellen, whenever you're ready, just let me know. So thank you all so much for participating in the breakout session. And at this point, I'm going to ask Natalie and Christina, in no particular order, don't all rush at the camera, to share with us what your group shared about why they either wanted or preferred or liked leading versus being in a team, or just all together said, no, I don't want to do teamwork.
Well, first of all, I'll start. Hi, everyone. Christina Scott here. We didn't have enough time to finish, but a word that I heard through and through our conversation was responsibility. It started off with the observation that no one had written responsibility in that first big group question. And then it kind of evolved into people talking about the responsibility on one side that it takes to be a leader, and then responsibility of being led. And that theme kind of goes throughout. So I would say the big theme that came up for our group is responsibility. On the side of people who said that they prefer to lead, they said that they believe that that responsibility actually makes them feel more invested to be a leader. So that was something interesting that came up, and it also resonated with me. I feel the same way personally. As a leader, I feel like I have like I'm more purposeful as a leader because of that. Because if I'm just a teammate, sometimes I'll just kind of sit in the corner and let the person lead and maybe lead too much. But as a leader, I do feel like I'm more productive. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing with us. I appreciate it. One of my mentees people, isn't she wonderful? Okay, Natalie, tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. What happened?
The good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Now, I don't think there's anything ugly. I think it was a real honest and a lot of head nods around the fact that leadership can be sometimes a chore, can be, a weight to carry. There's also that honesty of the fact that leadership is also very, there's a decision making. Some people like very much the decision making aspects of it, the accountability aspects of it. I really especially loved when someone mentioned that, it stretches them. They recognize that leadership stretches and motivates. And there was also a lot of head nodding around the fact that, the way sometimes leading on a team can feel like, okay, I'll take it over just because, no one else wants to. But it's also the fact that sometimes we perform better when, we're actually responsible for the thing that we're responsible for and not necessarily having to, be responsible for everybody else, right? So we talk about responsibility, but it's just also this element of there is a part of leading a team that is, sometimes maybe not preferential. So yeah, that was really good, really good. And there was one point where you don't have to be a member of a team to lead a team. And that was mentioned, and I thought that was really powerful because it's recognizing that whether you're leading the team because of the position that you're in versus just also recognizing that supporting the team is also a leadership responsibility. And I think that was very insightful. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalie, for sharing. I'm going to go back to sharing the screen, and Ellen, if you can be my sensei to just let me know if you see what I see. Hopefully you see everybody. Okay, so we're going to go back to the presentation, and I want to ask you, what is, and this is rhetorical, what is the most important part of, in your mind at least, of building a team? And you can put it in the chat if you are so inclined, or you can just think about it. When you think about teams, what is, if I said one thing that's the most important thing, what is the most important thing to you? Come on, people. Somebody's going to have to be brave. Diversity. I see rapport. Okay. Bet, I think you were going to say something, which is fine. You can actually say it to me. It's okay.
Oh, okay. You need to know what is needed to support the common goal of the team, and then choose your team based on it.
Okay, so knowing what the common goal is. Ellen says trust. Anybody else want to share? Purpose. Okay. Anybody else? Objectives. All right. So here is what I want to tell us this morning. The most important thing in developing any kind of team is relationships. That's right, relationships. It's relationship in twofold. So it's the relationship that you have with yourself. It's the relationship that you have with your team. Relationships. And everything else that you ladies, and if Tracy's still here, gentlemen mentioned, are all caveated on the idea of relationships. And you'll see that in a second. So what's the most important relationship in team building? The relationship that you have with yourself. So let's talk about that for a little bit in transparency. Many of us do not have the best relationships with ourselves. As team members, as team leaders, in fact, many of us are nicer to other people than we are to ourselves. Our self-talk is so harsh. We would never say the things that we say internally to ourselves to other people. But part of building a team is knowing yourself. It's learning yourself. It's knowing these are my negative qualities. These are my strengths, and being able to articulate that. Because here's the thing, if as a leader, you cannot articulate your strengths, your weaknesses, and acknowledge them, the likelihood that you will be able to articulate and embrace another person's strength and another person's weakness for that matter, very slim to none. Because we mirror behaviors as human beings. And so if I'm someone who's comfortable coming to the table and saying, this is what I'm good at, it's not going to be very difficult for me to come to the table and say, this is what Daphne is good at. This is what Michelle is good at. This is where Beth is awesome. This is where Una thrives. It will be easy for me to do that because I'm having that internal dialogue with myself. But if when I look at me, all I see are flaws, 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 flaws. The odds are when I look at you, that's what I'm looking for too. What are your flaws? What do you do wrong? Let's make a whole list of it. And so that's the first thing I want to challenge us to do when we think about teams, whether you're the leader or you're the team member, approach teams thinking about relationships, starting with the relationship that you have with you. And this brings me to assignments, because anybody who knows me knows I will throw an assignment at you real quick. Spend 10 to 15 minutes today. That's all I'm asking. Not a long time, just 10 to 15 minutes listing out what are your strengths and listing out what your weaknesses are. That's it. Simple assignment, and just list them out. What do I do well? What do I do not so well? And I don't even want you to think of it as weaknesses, because a lot of these things are things that we can get better at. But really be honest with yourself. What are my strengths? Where do I thrive? Where am I a rock star? And where are some of the areas that maybe I need a little bit of help? Just a tiny bit of help. Now I want to ask you the next question, which is, what is your relationship to others on your team? This meme cracks me up, because for anybody who you're familiar with this actress, very animated, but this particular scene is essentially someone trying to talk with her and is sharing with her that they're supposed to be working together in a team. And she's like, you and who? Like me and you? I think not. Basically, I think not. And so the question for all of us is, what is your relationship with your team? And what is your relationship with yourself? It's very important that you think about it and really be honest. Again, a lot of us think of teams and leadership as an external work, but I really want to challenge you to think of it as internal work. It's less about who is not doing what. And if you can do the work in yourself, it's easier to work with other people. So again, I'm going to ask you, do you like you? Are you open to understanding where your flaws are? Are you also open to admitting what your strengths are? Because it's both. There's some of us who we hide our strengths. So it's a twofold question for us. Now I want to move on a little bit and talk to us about purpose. It's really important that you find out, and this is a quote by Nelson Mandela, and all he's saying here is, to find out who you are has to be intentional. Essentially, you're not going to learn yourself by accident any more than you learn another human being by accident. You will have to, on a daily basis, say, okay, I need to check in with Ena. What do I do well and what do I not do well? And make my peace with who I am today. Not who I want to be tomorrow, not where I'm trying to go, but who am I today? Does that sound good to everybody? And if you have any questions, like I said, just put it in the chat. We will get to it in a second. All right. Now we're going to do a little bit of confessional time. Just a little truth telling. How many of you feel like you can be dysfunctional in a team setting, whether you're the leader or the team member? Tell the truth, and let whatever you believe in be ashamed. Tell the truth. Do you come with dysfunction to your team? And I'm gonna give us a little bit of story time. Since I'm telling everybody to confess, I will start with myself. So how many of us feel like a little bit of dysfunction? We come to the table, a little bit of dysfunction. I'm gonna just veer off and say, anybody who says I don't come to the team with dysfunction, that in itself is your dysfunction. The fact that you don't think that you have any dysfunction. The truth is, we are human beings, flawed individuals. We come to every situation with stuff. Some of us, think about it this way. And I did say this was going to be confessional time. So here's the confessional. I am the baby of my family. And it's a very high performing group of characters that I happen to share siblingship with. And so when you're in that kind of environment, you are essentially trying to figure out what your voice is. It looks like, sounds like, etc. So what I noticed in my teens and my early 20s, every team I got into, I had one of two reactions. Either I would be the person who has to do everything on the team. I have to lead, I have to be seen, I have to such and such and such, because that baby of the family thing was working through my system. Or second reaction, I would just lean into my introversion and just be a true introvert, don't participate, don't contribute to the group, and just wait for them to make a ton of mistakes. Then they'll have to call on Ena to do something to save the day. Then Ena will arise and then have her moment in the sunshine. That, to be honest, that was me up until maybe 23. The shock of finishing medical school was a jolt that I had to come out of that mental state. But that's the truth. That was the dysfunction that I was bringing to teams. And I think for all of us, we have to think, what is my dysfunction? What do I do that makes a team not function at its optimal? Let me say it that way. Because for most of us, when we look at teams, we're thinking, you don't do this, Daphne, you don't come to meetings, Tanisha, you don't do your deliverables, Natalie, you're late on such and such and such. It's always our fingers are pointed the other direction. It's the other person. They don't do this. They're not carrying their weight. But we really need to ask the question, what am I bringing to the table that may or may not be causing people on my team to not show up as their best? I've been in teams where it's not for a lack of talent. I don't know if anybody has ever been in a team where it's a bunch of very skilled people, yet the team can't produce anything. Anybody? Because I know I've been there. High functioning individuals where when it's them doing their own stuff, churning out just amazing work, then you bring them into a team and all of a sudden plummet. For anybody who's a fan of sports, I'm a huge basketball fan as a sidebar. So I'm going to use the basketball analogy. Some years ago, most of us will remember the drama of Miami Heat trying to form a super team. And so they brought these extra talented people to try to make this massive mega team. So we had Shaq on the team, Dwayne Wade was on the team, and of course, LeBron had it was the whole drama of him leaving Cleveland and everything that came with that saga. So we had this amazing team that had 3 superstars. They start their regular season, can win regular season games. We're not even talking playoffs. Regular season games, you know it's bad, where at that time you can't win a game against Detroit. And Detroit was a hot mess in that season, but they were struggling. And then the question became, what's the issue? Because we have these really talented people. Why are they not delivering? And what that incident shows is that skill set alone is not what makes a team functional, because all of them came into that team from their respective teams as the team head. And so that's the role they expected to play. But all of a sudden, they're in this situation where periodically you can't be the leader anymore. You have to give someone else leadership. And so the team started to metamorph just a little bit and move around. And a very obscure character got thrown into the mix. Most people don't even know who Shane Bartier is. If you're not a legit fan of basketball, you have probably never heard that name. Like, as I'm mentioning, you're looking at me like, who is this man now again? But here's the thing. He arose as the unassuming leader in that team. And here is all he had to do. He just had to position these superstars in a position where they could play something that's different from what they traditionally played. And then, as they say, the rest is history. They wanted to win 2 championships. I'm still salty as a fan of the Lakers, but we'll leave that one for another day. So my question really is, think about what functionality or the lack thereof you bring to the teams that you're a part of. And be honest about it. Have a little confessional time, just like I did. Think about what your relationship to other people looks like. Is it a, I'm me, you're you, all the way over there? Like, when the concept of we is mentioned, you're like, say what now again? I do my thing on the team. You do whatever you do on the team. And I guess we're a team, but we are technically not a we. Is that the vibe you bring to your teams? It's an honest question to answer, because if you come to a team with that approach, Even if you have people who are talented, who can do quality work, they will sit you out and leave you to do whatever you do on the team, since you feel you can do it all. You literally, I mean, if you can, why should any of us do anything if you actually have the ability to do everything? Here are the things I want to talk to us about today that are very practical things that all of us can do to hopefully just be slightly better as team leaders. The first, and I'm going to just move Daphne and some of the faces out of the way. So the first thing we can do is, number one, be people smart. And we'll talk about each of these segments a little bit, but the first thing, be people smart. The second is, and this is so interesting that both Christina and Natalie's teams talked about this, feeling like your team is not as invested, or on the contrary, feeling like you're super invested when you're the team leader. As a team leader, you need to make sure everybody on your team is just as invested as you are. The third thing is building community. And then finally, and this is probably one of the biggest ones, managing your own defensiveness wherever you happen to be on the team. So now let's talk about being people smart. You can't really be people smart. And when I say people smart, we're speaking about emotional intelligence, relational intelligence. That's what we're talking about here. The first thing we have to be is humble. And to allow us to be humble, there are a couple of things we have to remember. Number one, you can't do everything by yourself. Number two, you are not always going to be the best at everything, point blank, period. No matter how good you are, there is somebody who will probably at some point, maybe not today, but at some point might be better than you. Part of humility is also understanding that I bring baggage to this team, and I have to be accepting of the potential baggage that another person brings to this team. Humility is also taking that position that, and I know a lot of times when we hear humility, people think, oh my gosh, you're going to cower down and be in one corner, cover your face and not be seen. That is not what humility is. In fact, humility is not the same thing as lacking in confidence. It's not the same thing as lacking in self-understanding, self-worth. That is not what it is. I will even do you a solid and say, if you are lacking in self-confidence, it's hard to actually be humble because you are not presenting the best cut of yourself anyways. So how can you actually be humble? Humility is the task of saying, I'm going to work hard to be my best cut of myself, but I understand that even that best cut cannot always be the best person in every room. And so for you as a team member or as a team leader, either way you find yourself, humility is very important. If you come to the table with humility, if you are a team member and you're in a team where you actually probably know more than your leader, you can give them grace. It allows you not to come to the meetings and say, and show up your leader because you know better than that person. On the flip side, when you're a member, when you're a leader of a team and you're humble, you don't come to every meeting trying to press down on everybody else, just everything they're doing wrong, every mistake. This is the time we're going to hash it out. It forces you to think just a little bit of how you relate to people as human beings. The second thing is respect. I feel like this word is overused in this space, but here are some of the things I want you to think about when we think about respect. Respect is the understanding or the ability to see another human being. That's it. I see you, you see me. I may not agree with you, but I see you. I may not actually even do what you're recommending that we do, but I see you. I acknowledge you. I'm not dismissing the words that are coming out of your mouth. I'm going to share a little interesting thing that happened to me fairly recently. One of the things I've been doing for the last couple of years is setting up these clinics that some of them are local and some of them are out of the country. And most of the clinics, they have to have a financial team because we have to figure out how we're going to make our money work. The monies that even for the teams that are the clinics that are run with grants, you still want to make sure you have accounting that's really just making sure that your money is correct, everything is in order, etc. We're having a virtual team party, and somebody cracked a joke about accounting, where they're like, accounting is boring, accounting does nothing, accounting doesn't contribute. And it was a joke. It was an honest joke. But what I realized 2 months after that, we were having a group meeting, and I realized that little by little, accounting wasn't coming to group meetings. We went from having 4 people in accounting to 3, to 2, to 1, to nobody in accounting coming to meetings. And so I decided to have a little powwow with them. Where are you at? Why are you not coming to meetings? And one of them shared with me that they felt very disrespected. It was a joke, but you're telling a whole department that whatever they do doesn't count. A joke, but a very expensive joke. And it led to disengagement. And so that's what we think of, at least that's what I think about when I think about respect. It's seeing everybody. And as the team leader in that instance, it was my job to come after that person had said what they said and smooth it out. 1 or 2 seconds of smoothing it out, and we may never have been in that situation, but I didn't. And so that was a missed opportunity for me. But the good thing about it is that it was a lesson learned for me, that respect is so important. In fact, it's probably one of the strongest relational currencies that we have. Sometimes respect is even more important than likability. We don't always have to like each other, but can we just respect each other to begin with? And then the third thing is genuineness. And when we were talking about leadership earlier, several code words or synonyms of genuineness came up. So people talked about truth telling and honesty and veracity and things like that. This is what we're talking about here. Being true to what you're saying. As a leader, there is nothing worse than saying something and then you make an about turn and you say something completely different to other members of your team. What we don't realize often is that your team is communicating whether you're there or not. And so what you don't want is to say something to team members. You walk away, you say something else to a different team member and walk away. And those people get a chance to talk and they see that the words that are coming out of your mouth not lining up. In fact, I encourage leaders, if you're not sure, sometimes silence is actually a good thing. It's better to be silent than to have inconsistent messaging going across your team. This is also true for you as a team member. Many of us have seen team members where in front of the leader, they're a certain kind of way. The leader walks out of the room and it's like a switch and bait. They're a completely different person. In front of the leader, they're talking about deliverables and this is what they're going to do. And the leader walks out the room and this person is just about to do nothing. They let other people carry the work. That inconsistency of character is an issue. It's an issue as a team leader, and it's certainly an issue if you're a team member. So genuineness. So these are the things we have to do to be people smart. We got to be humble, show respect, and be genuine. Now let's talk about making your team invested. And this is going to require me to ask a question for all of you. This is an honest question. For the teams that you lead or you are a part of, honestly, is everybody in your team as invested as you are? Honest question. And I'm going to look at Debbie says no one is safe with Ena. So someone says no, no, nope. And for everybody who is saying no, are you the person who is not as invested as other people, or are you more invested? Okay, so Sorrel says most times I find myself to be the most invested, more invested. All right. So we're kind of getting both sides of the coin. I will be very honest. There are some teams where I'm not invested at all. And in fact, as I've gotten older, if I'm not invested in a team, I hop off the team because I feel like life is short and I need to say yes to the things that I actually care about and I'm invested in. But here's the challenge, though, that I want to pose to us. How can we make our team more invested? Not a rhetorical question, I'm actually asking us, how do you feel that you can make your team more invested? And I will share with you some things that I've used that have worked, but I'm asking you, how do you make your team more invested? Okay, let me make sure I can see the chat. Leading by example. Okay. How else do you make your team more invested? Building rapport. And let me share some thoughts, just throwing it out there. And you might have better ones than I do, but I'm going to throw a couple out to you. Here are some thoughts. And I'm going to start from the middle of the screen. Listen first. How about we try going into a meeting or a discussion with a team, listening first? No guns a-blazing, no agenda. Even if you know what your agenda is, just listen. Because here is one thing about human beings. We like to be heard. Even if you are not going to take anything that I said, you still want to be heard. And so that's the first thing. We have to lend people our ears and make them feel like what they have to say matters. The other thing you want to do, especially, and this is so important when you're the leader, get the input of your team. Never go into a team situation and say, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, this is when we're doing it, and we're done. Scene, the meeting is over. Because I assure you, the majority of people listening to you are not going to be invested in anything that you said. Zero. You'll get some outlier individuals who will be interested, who will self-motivate and buy into your idea. But most human beings will not. And the reason is simple. Most of us want to feel that we are contributing to whatever we're a part of. And if all I have to do is listen to your ideas and your perspective, why should I be invested? Why should I actually care? Another way you can rev up interest is co-create with your team. I mean, this doesn't mean that you don't have your own ideas, but come in with an open heart and open mind and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking about us doing. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I really want to encourage the leaders who are in the room to please, if you do nothing else, take this step. Let your team coach you. You're probably thinking, meaning what exactly? This is what I mean. Letting your team coach you means you get feedback, honest feedback from your team. Go to your team as often as you possibly can and ask them for feedback. Some of it will not be pretty. I'm not going to lie to you and say the feedback is always going to be kosher. You will hear things that you're like, gasp, how can you say that about me? But this is where putting our defensiveness at the side will do us a favor, and we'll talk about that in a second. As leaders, you also want to adjust to the team, and this is what a lot of leaders, we fail to do. Most of us, we want our team to adjust to us. We want to come into and say, this is my style, this is what I do, make it work or ship out. But as a leader, your job is the opposite. Your job is to adjust to your team. In a team setting, the leader should be the most flexible person, the most flexible player who can plug into wherever and be a jack of all trades for everybody. That's the job of leadership. And to be honest with you, if you do this well early, you will have to do almost nothing as the team leader. Fun fact for you. When I served as the district director, and Danielle and I, we joke about this all the time because Danielle was my number 2 at the time. Danielle was like, I feel like you're always happy and rested when you come to meetings. And most people are stressed. In fact, people were warning me before the beginning of my district director year. Oh my gosh, it's going to be so stressful. You're going to be so stressed. Stress. Make sure your husband is there to cushion your stress. That's all I heard coming into this role. And so I kept thinking, I mean, did I make an error to sign up for this role? Like, what is this forewarning thing that these people are doing? But what I realized is part of what they were really telling me is you would have to sell your ideas to people. And so you'll be working hard doing that. What I decided to do was very simple. I didn't talk to my team about the district goals because nobody cares. What they cared about was their goal, the thing that they were responsible for. And so that was how I had conversations with everybody. For those who are area directors, I only talk to you about your area. If you're the area 12 director, I talk to you about your area. What's the purpose of your area? What do you need to get done? How can I support you? That's the end of the conversation. We're not talking about me and my bigger district goals. And that was how I had every single conversation. When I was talking to club officers, just talking to you about your club, that's it. I didn't talk about area business, division business, none of that. Your club, how can I support your club? And by making everybody focus on their one small thing, what ended up happening is that everybody's small thing contributed to the big thing, which was my thing. And so my shoulders were not as burdened as everybody thought they would be, because the year was set up literally putting their stuff in front of their face. So encouraging everybody, you got to do your stuff, not the stuff that is my stuff, but your stuff. Let me say it a different way. In our club, for instance, we have Debbie, who is this phenomenal VP of education, like total rock star individual. If Debbie were to say, have a team, and one person, the whole job of that person is just to fill the agenda. No other activity is happening in that person's life but the agenda. She has another person. Their whole job is just to make sure that folks know what their roles are and they can prepare and do their roles. That's the whole job. All of a sudden, what we will find is that each person, if they can focus 100% on their little part, everybody doing their little part is going to make Debbie basically be chilling and living her best life and doing not much of anything. Debbie is like, yes to that. Shameless plug, by the way, for anybody who's interested in supporting Debbie on the educational seminar. We're taking applications. Okay. Debbie, don't say I didn't do you a favor today. All right. But that's part of what I'm saying as a leader, making sure that you are adjusting to your team and making their goals the priority. So don't come in trying to make yours the big thing. Make their thing, their little contribution, make that the focus of conversations that you have with them. And then we talked about building community, but I want to spend a little bit of time on this one, because most of us, we build teams, but we build teams in silos, literally. I've seen many teams where it's a fractured team. So it's a team in retrospect, but if you look at the team and you're someone who's intuitive, you can see that 2 people are on one side, one other character is on one side, 3 people are in one corner. Maybe the team leader is kind of a surrogate member of one of these sub-teams, and the whole team is not coalescing together. Your job as the leader, in another way I can say it, as a leader, you can't be part of the clique in a team. Let me say it that way. You can't have overt favorites, even if you're a human being, so you're allowed to actually have legit favorites. But within a team setting, as a leader, you're cheerleading for everybody. You are not the person, this is not the time to have favorites, to say, I like this one better. Even if, again, you're a human being, you will have that. But think about it almost from the perspective of the individual who is not the favorite. Why would that individual want to contribute to this team if they... Okay. Ellen, can you tell me what was the last thing you heard me say? Just so I'm sure that...
Debbie, what was the last thing you heard? I was responding to someone in the chat.
Oh, it's okay.
What was the last thing you heard, Debbie?
She was talking about having favorites on the team and how
Gotcha.
you would feel if you were not the one that was the favorite.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Debbie. And so that's a question for you as a team leader, and even if you're a team member, because oftentimes we have the designated leader of the team, But have you also been in teams where there's several people who are not the formal leader, but in retrospect, that's the real leader of the team? You want to make sure that if you happen to be that person who is a secondary leader or surrogate leader on that team, or someone who's a person of influence who happens to be on the team, and you know you have the ear of several people, you can't afford to be in cliques. You have to be part of building community, building rapport, bringing people in. If you see someone who is kind of a fringe team member, they come and as soon as the team functions are done, they've disappeared into the sunset. You want to make sure that you're really bringing that person into the fold and having a meaningful and intentional relationship with that person. And it's not always the easiest. I will be very candid with you that as an introvert, building teams is struggle bus for me sometimes. And building relationships and really pulling people in who I don't naturally gravitate towards can be a struggle. But that's part of what you must do if you want to have effective teams. You don't have the luxury of saying, okay, within my team, we have 10 people. I'm going to just really, really tighten the reins with 2. And then the other 8, however way. Because you don't know who in that 8 might be your strongest team player. You might be casting your eggs in the baskets that the 2 people that you're close to are. But as we were talking about earlier, mess around and find out that the person that is your close friend cannot deliver any deliverables, can't be early for anything. Everything they do is late. And so you want to be sure that you don't put all your proverbial leadership eggs in one basket because you don't know who will step up. You just don't know. I think about myself. Here is the irony. When I was serving in district leadership as an area director, and this is true story, and for the people who served with me at the time, they know this, I said nothing in the whole year that I was an area director at the district meetings. When I say I said nothing, I literally mean the words. We would have those meetings for about 6 hours, and the meeting would go on, and we would go home. No contribution, zip from me. What changed that for me was one day, my then division director came to me and she said, girl, I don't know what's going on, but you sitting at the back and reading what appears to be your medical books and typing what appears to be your assignments is not going to work. You have to be engaged with the team. If she never had that conversation with me, I probably would not have engaged with the team. I was actually perfectly fine being in my corner, doing my task and going home. But I needed someone to just give me that extra push, that extra boost to pull me along. So think about how you build community around your teams. Now, this is my favorite, because most times when we talk about teams, everybody's like, it's the others, it's them, those people, those other characters. What if it's us? And how do we deal with defensiveness? Now, someone's probably saying on here, me, defensive? Never. Well, let's do a little bit of an experiment to see whether we are. Here are some traits, and this is not all of it, but some of my favorites when it comes to defensive responses. And if you see yourself in there, you don't have to say it in the chat, but you can also say it in the chat. There's some of us who do the poor me, woe is me. That is our response. That is our natural defense response. Somebody say one, you present an idea, somebody says something, and all of a sudden, woe is me, boo-hoo, horrible people out to get me. Are they really? Some of us, our favorite pastime is to shame other people. If they say something that we are not here for, that's our defensive response. Some of us, we just make everything sound like it's demise, doom and gloom, like catastrophe galore. That's our defensive response. People like myself, our defensive response is silence. We're just like, I'm not even going to engage. I will just withdraw and be silent from whatever this is. Some will play the blame game. Some of us even go into straight up confusion where it's almost like our brain freezes. We have a brain scramble. And then some of us have the all or nothing thinking. If they're not going to do it my way, we're going to do nothing. And so all of us, whether we admit it or not, we have a little bit of defensiveness going on. And it's a question of how do I ID? It's not how do I stop being defensive? That's not the question. It's how do I ID how defensiveness shows up? And how do I treat it? I'm a doctor, so it's always going to be about treatment. Now we're going to go to confessional time again. Here is my confession to all of you. In fact, this very morning, I had my own little defensive moment with my daughter. Facts. This morning, as I was preparing my little presentation, she was making a ton of noise. And my defensive response in that moment was essentially to shame her for her, what I felt was her noise making. Now, here are the facts though. I was preparing my presentation in her room. So is it appropriate for me to be mad at the kid for making noise in her own room because I was running away from the other kid? Probably not. And so suffice to say, that was not an appropriate response. That was a defensive response. And me snapping was defensive. There's no other way to say it. Of course, I apologize. We hugged and made up. But in that moment, I had to do these next steps. Number one, I had to acknowledge, Ena, you're being a mess. You're in somebody's room, somebody's space. And granted, it's your house, but this is her space. I had to recognize what the behavior was. The behavior was about to be getting upset. I had to call myself to reason. Then I had a little come up with my action plan. My action plan in my case was to migrate to an actual space that was designated for me to do my work. And then finally let it go. Let it go. Hug, kiss, and make up with my kid. So my task for you is to do that. Acknowledge what makes you defensive. What are your patterns? Come up with a plan and let it go. Now I want to wrap and kind of coach everything I've said in this. Teamwork is internal work. It's deep work. It's the work you do on yourself. It's not the work you do on other people, because you can't change or motivate another human being to do anything. Teamwork is honest work. It requires you to reflect on your strengths, your weaknesses, and the relationship that you have with yourself and the relationship that you have with others. If you're going to build effective teams and be on teams and be an effective team player, you have to learn to work on you and you have to learn to work with others. Thank you very much. And at this point, I will see if we can do a couple of questions before we move on. It's going to be very short-lived, but we will try to take a few. And just for the record, I am not looking at the chat. So Lauren and I think it was Lauren and Debbie that I had on chat duty. What did I miss, if anything?
You have one question from Ashley. She wanted to know, what do you do when your team only wants to provide input, but are not as interested in carrying out the actions of their input?
Thank you so much, Ashley, for that question. My thing is always, if you're going to bring an idea, you are going to be the person that will do it. It's really just how I roll on teams. Like anybody who knows me knows this. And the same is true for me. If I'm coming as your team leader, if I'm coming up with an idea, I need to have an approach to implementation. I can't just be like, this is my idea and dump it on your head. And so similarly, the people in your team, that has to be the expectation. When you come with ideas, you have to be ready to implement. Either you implement it yourself or you work in finding who is going to implement it, but you can't just throw ideas and then disappear. So as a leader, you set the tone for that by you yourself making sure when you bring ideas, you're part of getting it implemented. So that when you turn around and do the Ena and you say you have to implement, you're being honest and it's something that you yourself are doing, which is why sometimes when I have ideas, in my own teams, at least, I don't say anything until I have a plan for implementation, because even my team members will turn around and look at me and be like, so how are we going to do this? Since you told us we should do this. So that's my 2 cents on how you can make that work, Ashley. Additional questions, and it's okay to, if you still feel inclined to actually ask your question on video, we'll take it as well.
We have another question in the chat
Yes.
from, I think it's Leonora, if I'm pronouncing correctly. It says, what do you do if you have a toxic team member and he wants to ruin the mission of the team?
So toxicity is a relative term. What I mean by that is that there are toxic people that can be quarantined, that you as the leader, you can quarantine, and there's some toxicity that it will take the whole ship down. And so the first things first is to determine what level of toxicity are we dealing with. Talk to the person, the said person who is toxic, to figure out what the issue is. Because I've also been in teams, so I'll get a perfect example. I was in a team where everybody said that this particular woman was a toxic person. I didn't see it, but I could understand where they were coming from. I had a one-on-one conversation with her to figure out what is happening, like what is all of this? And what I realized is that the issue that was really stemming from her is that she was the least qualified person on paper. So in terms of degrees and accolades and things like that, she was least qualified. So that toxicity was her way of trying to always be seen, always be heard. And so what I had to do was, once I realized what the problem was, quote unquote, and why she was being toxic, we had a good conversation to talk about, okay, just because you don't have XYZ letters next to your name doesn't mean that you are not contributing meaningfully to the group. But it can be with you trying to essentially peck everybody else on the team to death, though. And so I had to have that very honest conversation with her. Sometimes when you have that conversation, the person is still not ready to see it. And if you are the person in authority, you may have to eject a person from a team. That's just the truth. You might have to sideline the person from the team, so give them less responsibility until they're ready to behave differently. It just depends, again, on the degree of toxicity that we're dealing with.
So Anna, and this is Ellen. I'm gonna read this question from Tony.
Yes.
And this will be the last question we can actually do.
No worries.
Her question was, what do you do when there's no time to co-create and there's just work that needs to be done? Not ideal, but it happens.
Oh, absolutely, Tony. And the thing is, there is a benefit of the doubt that your team will give you if traditionally you co-create and then you come in one moment and you're like, we need to do this real quick, because they know that this is not your regular way of operating. And so your team will actually give you the benefit of the doubt, because usually you tend to lean on the side of co-creating. And whenever that happens for me, honestly, I say that. I say, we are on a time crunch. We have to do this really quickly. I think this is the best way we're going to do it. If it shakes out, great, awesome. If it doesn't, I'll take the fall for it because I made the call and I made us go this direction. So setting it up that way where they understand that it's not because you just woke up and decided to do it by yourself, but just letting them know we're in a time crunch. We got to get something done. I'm the one who's responsible for the outcome. I'll take the flack if it's good. I'll take the flack if it's bad, and if it's good, we will all basically go to glory together. But that's how I would approach that. I would level with my team and tell them, we got to make a quick decision here, and there's no time for us to deliberate about this. All right, that's it for questions. If anybody has any offline questions, you can send it. I will try to answer it in the chat. Thank you so much for your time, and I will turn it back over to Ellen.